Escobal, a senior researcher at the Group for Analysis for Development here in Lima, Peru. I am a researcher and policy advisor around the topics of poverty, rural development, and the economic effect of liberalization on small-scale agriculture. I have been asked to discuss the overall effect of the increased participation of the small-scale farming in the market economy in Latin America, and in particular in what is called dynamic markets. Dynamic markets are those markets that are capable of absorbing increasing quantities of farmers' output due to their size or their rapidly increasing demand for the products they buy. Typically, they consider products that have higher value added than normal. They have obviously higher profits, but at the same time, they have higher transaction costs, and transactions are much more complex in those markets. I think that first it's important to recognize that not all small-scale farmers have been able to connect in a profitable and a sustainable way into dynamic markets. During the last few decades in Latin America, we have witnessed different pathways through which small farmers connect to markets. One, which is a very traditional one, will be what's called contract farming, which has offered us sort of mixed results. We have also seen the effect of collective action through cooperatives and other ways through which small farmers can accumulate and obtain the benefits of economies of scale. We can find some success stories for each of these two pathways, but we can also find that for each of these routes there have been a number of failures. So we need to recognize that it's not the path that small farmers take into the way they connect to markets, but the asset base they have, the capabilities they have, and the environmental context they work with, what are the important factors that may difference and may affect the likelihood of obtaining profitable and sustainable connections to markets. To understand which are the enabling factors that have facilitated successful participation of small-scale farming in Latin American markets, specifically in dynamic markets, we need to recognize that the small-scale farmer is very heterogeneous. Not only in Latin America, of course, but also across the world. Given this, it's not surprising that single factors may work well in some circumstances, but may not work well in others. It is very difficult to define a silver bullet that will allow small-scale farmers to connect to markets in a successful way. That is, in a profitable and sustainable way. We do know, however, from the Latin American experience, a number of factors that can help construct a more enabled environment in which small-scale farming may have a greater chances of success in connecting to dynamic markets. First, we need to understand that in a free market economy, governments play a key role delivering equality of opportunities. And when we are talking in terms of equality of opportunities for the rural poor, we are talking about a larger allocation of public investment in the provision of public goods. It is very difficult, if not impossible, that we can get good connections to markets if farmers lack roads, good roads, if they lack telecommunication, electricity, and other basic public services. So this is one key element, the political will of the government of allocate increasing amounts of investments for public goods and services. Second, we need to recognize that the small-scale farmers are typically constrained in several dimensions at the same time. They may have financial or liquidity constraints. They may face risky or uncertain environments, market environments, They may suffer the consequence of not being able to profit from economies of scale due to their small size of their plots. They may lack key public infrastructure. So even this simultaneous lack of services, good interventions are those that are able to simultaneously confront these restrictions at the same time. Simultaneous interventions are more likely to connect in a profitable way farmers to the markets rather than isolated interventions. Here we have evidence in Latin America associated, for example, in the bundling of public goods in order to improve the profitability of market access. We also know that technology adoption is more likely if small farmers are able to insure themselves from shocks. So insurance mechanisms bundled together with technology innovation are more likely to succeed in comparison to isolated innovations. Third, the single most important factor that small-scale farmers lack when trying to connect to markets are managerial abilities. Improving managerial activities empowers a farmer much beyond the specific crop or the specific produce that they are working at the time. Improving these skills has a long-term consequence in terms of empowering individuals in a more successful way of connecting to a broad range of markets. One alternative to the absence of managerial skills is the ability to connect small-scale farmers through non-governmental organizations, NGOs. They may provide the social capital needed to successfully link small producers facing high marketing costs with processors that face high uncertainty and high monitoring costs. So there is room for NGOs to work as intermediaries between small farmers and an agro-industry. Finally, small-scale farmers are typically part of a broader strategy that are followed by rural households. The evidence shows that those rural households that have been able to diversify their portfolios towards other sources of incomes are more likely to get out of poverty. I think that this trend is very much true for Latin America, but it's also very much true for Africa and South Asia. So providing the capabilities for and room for increasing income diversification is also part of the strategy, because some small farmers will be able to obtain gains from specializations and entering the market, but others will do their livelihood through more improving their capabilities for income diversification. In Latin America, we have specific examples where the participation of the small-scale farmers in dynamic markets has been successful. I think there is a strong evidence that only when incentives are properly aligned between small-scale farmers and agro-industry, it is possible to construct contracts that can be sustained in time and then can be profitable for both parties. One critical element here is to construct what is typically referred as incentive-compatible contracts. This means that each of the parts needs the other in order to get a successful connections to market. If one of the parts believe they don't need the other, there is very low probability that you can construct a contract and enforce it in a way that is profitable in the connections to markets. This has happened in Peru, for example, when small-scale farmers have had the rights for water or the right for land, and the agro-industry has some knowledge that the small farmers do not have. And then it's only connecting the two parts that these successful contracts appear. But in order to make these contracts successful, property rights related to land, property rights related to water need to be enforced appropriately in order to increase the bargaining power of small-scale farmers. In some cases, improving the property of what is called protection of denomination of origin, so the small farmers own the characteristics of the products they are selling, is that you can obtain a sensible increase in the bargaining power of small farmers. This has happened, for example, in Peru, when small farmers have been selling native potatoes in order to be sold to the agro industry to do potato chips and sell it to the market. We also know of specific examples of skillful farmers in the northern coastal regions of Peru, where they have been able to pool the resources together and contract managerial services. The managerial services are paid a small fixed fee plus a success fee that will depend on the savings that the manager is able to obtain through the purchases of inputs or through the possibility of gaining scale economies in the sales of outputs. Is by having this type of contracts where the small farmers really hire management skills, but at the same time there are incentives of the management in order to obtain higher profits by obtaining a higher profit that is shared between the manager and the small farmers, is that we can obtain more sensible ways of connecting in a profitable and sustainable way to markets. I think this kind of approaches need to be analyzed further.